For centuries, the world's greatest mysteries have remained unsolved, and some are getting stranger with time. From lost cities hidden beneath the waves to chilling modern disappearances, these are the 20 most mind-blowing unsolved mysteries that remain unexplained to this day. Number 1. Thonis-Heracleion, the city that slept beneath the sea. There was once a time when the great city of Thonis-Heracleion was the shimmering gateway to Egypt. Sailors from across the Mediterranean would have first glimpsed its towering temples dedicated to Amun and Khonsu, its bustling harbors, and the gold-tipped obelisks that caught the sun like fire. It was here that Greek merchants and Egyptian priests shared uneasy alliances, that spices from Arabia mingled with papyrus scrolls destined for Alexandria. And then it was gone. For over 1,000 years, Thonis-Heracleion existed only in half-forgotten legends and a scattering of inscriptions. Even Herodotus, the famed historian, spoke of a city in the Nile Delta swallowed by the waters. But for centuries, scholars dismissed it as little more than myth. That was until the year 2000, when French marine archaeologist Franck Goddio and his team made an astonishing discovery beneath the murky waters of Abu Qir Bay. There, hidden beneath layers of sand and silt, lay a city frozen in time. The divers found colossal statues toppled onto the seabed, still bearing their serene, inscrutable expressions. Entire temples lay scattered like the bones of some long-dead titan. Ships, actual wooden hulls, were preserved where they had sunk, many still carrying cargo that hadn't seen the light of day for over a millennium. And scattered everywhere were gold coins, ritual offerings, and strange religious artifacts whose purposes even Egyptologists struggle to explain. But with discovery came questions. Why had the city fallen? The evidence tells of gradual subsidence, the soft Nile delta soil giving way under the weight of massive stone structures. Some theorize a devastating earthquake struck, triggering tsunamis that swallowed the city whole. Others whisper of divine punishment, an echo of ancient curses said to guard the sacred temples. There's even a fringe theory, beloved by more imaginative minds, that Thonis-Heracleion was deliberately flooded by its own rulers, perhaps to hide treasures from invading forces. What makes this mystery all the more tantalizing is that the city seems to have vanished in the 2nd century BC, just as Alexandria was rising to prominence. Some historians wonder whether this was mere coincidence, or whether political intrigue played a role. Could the shifting tides of power have drowned Thonis-Heracleion not just in water, but in history itself? Today, as divers carefully lift statues from the seabed and conservators clean the barnacle-crusted faces of gods, one can't help but imagine the life that once thrummed here. The cries of merchants, the songs of sailors, the smoke curling from temple incense, and beneath the waves, in places yet unexplored, there may still lie secrets that could rewrite Egypt's history. Because if Thonis-Heracleion has taught us anything, it's this. Even the most glorious cities can vanish without a trace, and still find a way to whisper back through the centuries. Number 2. Guanabara Bay Amphoras, Rome's ghosts on Brazil's shore. In the shimmering waters off the coast of Rio de Janeiro lies one of the strangest puzzles in the history of exploration. A puzzle that, if true, could rewrite entire chapters of the human story. It began in 1982, when Robert Marks, a veteran marine archaeologist, was exploring Guanabara Bay. The water here is usually murky, hiding centuries of discarded relics from the port's busy history. But on that day, Marks spotted something that made him pause. An ancient amphora, the kind of clay jar once used by the Romans to store wine, olive oil, and grain. Soon, divers brought more to the surface, and then more still. Over 200 amphoras lay scattered across the seabed in patterns that suggested the wreck of a ship. The shape, style, and composition of these vessels seemed unmistakable. They were Roman. Not Portuguese, not colonial, but from the heart of the Mediterranean world, dating to perhaps the 3rd century AD. That raised an impossible question. What were Roman jars doing thousands of miles across the Atlantic, a full 12 centuries before Columbus or Cabral set foot in the New World? If the find was authentic, it would suggest that a Roman ship, or perhaps more than one, had crossed the ocean, either intentionally or blown hopelessly off course. The implications were staggering. It would mean the Romans had made landfall in South America long before the age of European exploration, leaving a trail of artifacts in their wake. But then, as often happens when history and politics collide, the mystery deepened and darkened. Before Marx could complete a proper excavation, the Brazilian government abruptly banned him from the site. Officially, they claimed the artifacts had been moved there during modern times, perhaps dumped by a ship transporting Mediterranean relics. Unofficially, Marx accused the authorities of covering up the find to avoid embarrassing Brazil's carefully curated colonial narrative. Adding to the intrigue, many of the amphoras vanished from the bay shortly afterward, as if spirited away. Skeptics argue that the amphoras could have been replicas or trade goods carried here centuries later, perhaps by Spanish or Portuguese vessels. Others insist the very layout of the find, the clustering, the burial in seabed sediment, points to something far older, far stranger. Marx, until his death, remained adamant. They were Roman, and they were proof of a forgotten voyage across the Atlantic. To this day, the waters of Guanabara Bay guard their secret well. Visibility is poor, the currents unpredictable, and the exact location of the main cluster is known to only a handful of people. For some, it's a tantalizing what if, a glimpse at a history that could have been. For others, it's a cautionary tale about how quickly the past can be hidden or erased when it doesn't fit neatly into the story we want to tell. Somewhere beneath the waves, Rome may still be waiting. Number 3. The Great Sphinx of Giza. The silent riddle of the desert, in the baking sands of the Giza Plateau, older than the pyramids that rise behind it, sits a creature carved from stone. Part lion, part human, and entirely enigmatic. The Great Sphinx has gazed eastward for thousands of years, its face weathered, its nose missing, its true origins shrouded in the shifting mists of history. To most Egyptologists, the Sphinx was commissioned around 2500 BC by Pharaoh Khafra, whose pyramid towers just behind it. The face, they say, is his own, immortalized in limestone, a guardian of the necropolis. But the Sphinx has a way of resisting certainty. Its sheer scale, a single block of stone over 240 feet long, and the weathering patterns on its body suggest to some researchers that it may be far older, perhaps thousands of years older than the pyramids themselves. This older Sphinx theory was championed in the 1990s by geologist Robert Schoch, who argued that the deep vertical fissures on the Sphinx's body were caused by prolonged water erosion, not wind and sand. If true, this would push its construction back to a time when the Sahara was green and rainy, long before Egypt's known pharaohs. But if it wasn't Khafra, then who carved it? And why? Ancient texts are silent. No inscriptions on the Sphinx itself declare its maker. The Egyptians of later dynasties seem to treat it as a relic from an even more ancient past, restoring it rather than claiming its creation. Thutmose IV, in 1400 BC, famously erected the dream stele between its paws, claiming the Sphinx spoke to him in a dream and promised him kingship if he would clear the sand from its body. Then there are the legends. Oh, the legends. Some Arab historians wrote of hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx, containing lost records of a forgotten civilization. Early explorers told tales of a network of tunnels beneath Giza, guarded by the statue. Modern radar scans have indeed detected voids beneath its paws, though Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities insists they are natural cavities, not man-made rooms. The mystery lingers. Even the missing nose has its myths. Popular lore blames Napoleon's cannons, but sketches from before his campaign show it was already gone, perhaps chiseled off centuries earlier to deface a sacred symbol. Standing before it, you can feel why the Sphinx has inspired such speculation. It's not just its age or size. It's the sense that it is watching, that it knows something we don't. Maybe it's a relic of a lost chapter of human history. Maybe it's exactly what the textbooks say it is. Or maybe it's both. The Great Sphinx will never speak, yet it doesn't need to. It has been asking the same question for millennia. And we, the curious, keep coming back to try and answer. Number 4. The Great Unconformity. The missing chapter of Earth's story. Imagine opening a history book, only to find that hundreds of pages in the middle have been torn out. No explanation, no fragments left, just a leap from one era to another. That's essentially what geologists face when they look at the Great Unconformity, one of the most baffling geological mysteries on Earth. The Great Unconformity is not a single place, but a phenomenon seen in rock layers across the world. In some spots, the Grand Canyon being one of the most famous examples, there is a stark boundary where ancient bedrock, billions of years old, lies directly beneath much younger sedimentary rock. The missing layers represent more than 1 billion years of Earth's history. Gone. No gradual fade, no consistent record, just an almost surgical removal of time. Think about that. 1 billion years. That's longer than the time between the first multicellular life and the extinction of the dinosaurs. We should see the evidence of entire continents shifting, mountain ranges rising and falling, ancient seas teeming with life. Instead, we have silence. Theories abound, and each one reads like a different kind of epic. Some geologists suggest that the missing rock was stripped away by massive glaciations. Snowball Earth, periods when our planet froze nearly from pole to pole, grinding away the surface under miles of ice. Others suspect colossal tectonic upheavals, where continents collided and ripped apart, dragging huge swathes of crust deep into the mantle. There's even a hypothesis that ties the Great Unconformity to the rise of complex life itself, that this massive erasure of rock somehow reset Earth's chemistry, making it possible for the Cambrian explosion to occur. But here's the catch. There's no single cause that neatly explains all locations where the unconformity appears. The gaps aren't uniform in size or age. In some places, the missing time is only a few 100 million years. In others, it's far more. It's as if the planet's geological record has been selectively edited. For the more imaginative among us, the possibilities stretch beyond science. Could an asteroid impact of unimaginable scale have scoured the surface? Did some long-lost geological process erase the evidence of an entire Precambrian world? A world whose life forms might not resemble anything we know? Of course, mainstream science doesn't venture into such speculation, but the mystery leaves room for wonder. Standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, you can trace the line with your eyes. Below it, the dark, ancient Vishnu schist, nearly 2 billion years old. Above it, bright sandstone from the Cambrian period, 500 million years ago. And in between, nothing, just the shadow of what was. The Great Unconformity reminds us that the Earth is not just a storyteller, it's also an editor, capable of erasing whole chapters. And we, the readers, are left holding the book, wondering what it is we'll never know. Number 5. Salish Sea Floating Feet. The strangest things the tide brings in. It began quietly in August 2007. A lone hiker was walking along a beach on Jedediah Island, off the coast of British Columbia, when she spotted something strange, a single sneaker lying in the sand. Inside was a human foot, still wearing its sock. Within a week, another foot appeared, this time on Gabriola Island. Then another, and another. Over the yaws, more would wash ashore, scattered along the beaches of the Salish Sea, a sprawling network of coastal waters between British Columbia and Washington State. As of today, at least 21 feet have been found. Nearly all were inside sneakers, some brand new, some weathered by months at sea, and always only feet. No rest of the body. It sounds like the setup for a macabre horror story, but this is all documented fact. Each discovery sent waves of speculation, rippling through the media and public. Was there a serial killer dumping victims into the water? Was it the work of organized crime? An occult ritual? Fishermen whispered about unlucky boaters who had crossed the wrong people. Conspiracy theorists suggested everything from plane crashes to government cover-ups. Police and forensic experts, however, had a less sinister, though no less unsettling, explanation. Many of the feet were eventually identified through DNA as belonging to people who had gone missing years earlier, often presumed drowned. The key to the mystery, they say, lies in modern sneaker design. Since the 1980s, running shoes have been made with lightweight foam and air pockets, making them highly buoyant. When a body decomposes in water, joints weaken, and the feet, encased in these floating shoes, can detach and drift to shore, protected from scavengers by the shoe's structure. That explanation makes sense for some of the cases, but not all. Several of the feet remain unidentified to this day. Some turned up miles apart from one another, in conditions suggesting they had not been in the water for the same amount of time. And the pattern, the fact that this began suddenly in 2007, after decades without similar reports, nags at even the most rational minds. Adding to the eerie atmosphere is the geography of the Salish Sea itself, a maze of islands, strong tides, and hidden coves. Currents can carry debris for weeks before spitting it out on some lonely beach. It's the kind of place where mysteries can hide in plain sight, where the ocean is always just a little too deep, a little too dark. Today, the floating feet phenomenon has become part of local lore. Some beaches have even seen tourists arrive, hoping, morbidly, to stumble upon one. For the families of the missing, each discovery is a cruel blend of closure and renewed grief. And for the rest of us, it's a reminder that the sea keeps its own secrets, and sometimes it decides to share them in the most unsettling way imaginable. Number 6. Thames Torso and Whitehall. Murders. London's forgotten Ripper. When people speak of Victorian London's most notorious killer, the name Jack the Ripper inevitably comes up. But while the Ripper haunted Whitechapel's alleys in 1888, another killer was at work, just as gruesome, just as mysterious, and in some ways even more chilling. This is the story of the Thames Torso murders, also known as the Whitehall Mystery. Between 1887 and 1889, police began finding dismembered human remains in and along the River Thames. Not full bodies, just parts. A leg here, a torso there. The first case emerged in September 1887, when workers discovered a woman's decomposed trunk floating near Raynham. No arms, no legs, no head. The next year, in the middle of Jack the Ripper's reign, another torso appeared. This time in the basement of Scotland Yard's new headquarters in Whitehall, of all places. The building was still under construction, and yet somehow a killer had deposited part of a human body there without being seen. More followed. A woman's dismembered remains were discovered in a package at Horsley Down, others on the Thames foreshore. And in 1889, the Pinchin Street torso turned up beneath a railway arch in Whitechapel itself. The victims were never conclusively identified. No heads were ever recovered, and the manner of cutting, precise but brutal, suggested the killer had anatomical knowledge, perhaps a butcher or a surgeon. What made the torso murders even more sinister was their overlap with the Ripper killings. Some newspapers speculated they were the work of the same man, but the police disagreed. The Ripper's victims were left intact, their wounds visible to shock and terrify. The torso killer, by contrast, dismembered the bodies, possibly to conceal identities, or for some darker ritualistic reason. Adding to the mystery, the Thames acted as both hiding place and accomplice. Strong currents could carry body parts far from where they entered the water, scattering the remains and erasing vital clues. In one case, detectives thought they had a suspect, a man seen hauling a suspicious parcel near the river, but he vanished before they could question him. Despite the Victorian obsession with cataloguing and policing, the torso murders faded from public memory, overshadowed by the enduring infamy of Jack the Ripper. But among crime historians, they remain an open wound in London's past. No one knows how many victims there really were, or whether the killer stopped or simply moved on. Today, standing on the misty banks of the Thames, it's easy to imagine the black water hiding more than just history. Somewhere beneath those dark tides, the truth may still lie, a truth carried away long ago, piece by piece, by both the river and time itself. Number 7. Axeman of New Orleans. Murder in Ragtime, New Orleans, 1918. The city sweltered under the thick summer air, the scent of magnolia and sweat mixing in the streets. Jazz spilled from dance halls, rolling like warm syrup through the French Quarter. But as night fell, another rhythm crept into the city, the quiet, deliberate sound of a man lifting an axe. The Axeman's reign began in May of that year, targeting mostly Italian immigrant grocers and their families. His method was chillingly consistent. He would break into homes by removing a panel from a back door, then attack the occupants with an axe, often their own, taken from the yard or tool shed. Sometimes he killed. Sometimes he left his victims battered but alive. There was no pattern to his mercy. The murders were brutal and seemingly motiveless. No valuables were stolen, no grudges uncovered. The police were baffled. Rumors swirled that the killer was a lunatic, a jealous lover, or even a demon stalking the streets. Then, in March 1919, a letter arrived at the Times-Picayune, dripping with menace and theatrical flair. In the letter, the Axeman claimed he was no mortal man at all, but a spirit from the hottest hell. He declared that on a certain night, he would pass over any home where a jazz band was playing. "One thing is certain," he wrote, "and that is that your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night will get the axe." New Orleans, ever the city of music, responded in its own way. On the appointed night, March 19th, Jazz poured from every bar, every home, every street corner. Dance halls were packed. Bands played into the early hours. And true to his word, the Axeman killed no one that night. But the respite didn't last. More attacks followed, the last in October 1919. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, the Axeman was gone. No arrest was ever made. Some suspected Frank, Doc Mumphrey, a petty criminal with violent tendencies, but nothing was proven. Others whispered that the Axeman had simply moved to another city, perhaps even another country, to continue his dark work. The Axeman became more than a killer. He became folklore. Musicians wrote songs about him, authors spun tales from his crimes, and his legend still hangs in the humid air of the Crescent City. Some say the rhythm of jazz saved lives that night in March. Others wonder if the Axeman simply enjoyed playing with the city, using fear as his own twisted instrument. To this day, when the streets of New Orleans fall quiet late at night, a few locals claim you can still hear him. Not the scrape of a blade, but the faintest sound of footsteps, keeping time with the ghost of a long-forgotten jazz tune. Number 8. Kaspar Hauser, the boy from nowhere. On a spring day in 1828, in the bustling Bavarian city of Nuremberg, a teenage boy appeared in the town square, dressed in coarse peasant clothes and clutching a strange letter. He could barely walk, stumbled as if unused to sunlight, and spoke only a few halting words. The letter, unsigned and in an unsteady hand, claimed the boy's name was Kaspar Hauser, and that he had been kept in confinement since infancy, never allowed to leave a small, dark cell. Kaspar could write his name, but seemed ignorant of the simplest facts of life. He didn't know what bread was, didn't recognize the taste of cooked meat, and was fascinated by every new sight. The townspeople were astonished, and the mystery of his origin quickly made him a sensation across Europe. Was he a feral child, raised in isolation, an abandoned orphan, or something far stranger? In the weeks that followed, Kaspar learned to speak more fluently and told an extraordinary story. He claimed he had spent his entire life in a tiny cell with a straw bed, a few wooden toys, and bread and water for food. A mysterious man, whose face he never saw, had cared for him, bringing food while he slept. One day, this man had led him out, taught him a few phrases, and set him loose in the city with the letter. Theories about Kaspar's true identity exploded. Some believed he was a fraud, an attention seeker who had invented his tale. Others suspected he was the secret heir to the throne of Baden, hidden away as part of a dynastic conspiracy. The idea that he might be a kidnapped prince gained traction after whispers that his appearance resembled members of European nobility. But Kaspar's new life was anything but safe. In October 1829, a hooded stranger attacked him with a knife, leaving a wound on his forehead. He survived, but the attacker was never found. 3 years later, in December 1833, Kaspar staggered home with a deep stab wound to his chest. He told his caretakers that a man had lured him to the Ansbach Court garden with the promise of information about his past, then stabbed him and fled. Within 3 days, Kaspar was dead. His pockets contained a folded note, written in mirror writing, riddled with cryptic phrases. Some interpreted it as the killer's taunt. Others saw it as evidence of Kaspar's involvement in his own downfall. The handwriting didn't match his own, but neither did it match anyone known. To this day, no one knows whether Kaspar Hauser was a lost prince, an abused captive, or an elaborate imposter. Modern DNA tests on alleged relatives have been inconclusive. What is certain is that he arrived from nowhere, captured the imagination of a continent, and died with his secrets intact. Even now, in the quiet gardens of Ansbach, some visitors swear they feel a presence, a lonely boy, forever searching for the home he never knew. Number 9. The Amber Room. The eighth wonder that vanished. Imagine walking into a room where the walls themselves glow like frozen sunlight, panels of golden amber carved with impossible detail, set with mirrors that scatter the light into endless warm reflections. That was the Amber Room, a masterpiece so dazzling it was called the eighth wonder of the world. And today, it's gone. The Amber Room was born in the early 1700s, commissioned by King Frederick I of Prussia and crafted by the finest German artisans. It wasn't merely decoration, it was a symphony of art, history, and nature. Sheets of translucent amber, some several inches thick, covered the walls, inlaid with gold leaf and gemstones. It was, in the words of one visitor, like stepping inside a jewel. In 1716, the room was gifted to Tsar Peter the Great as a symbol of the alliance between Prussia and Russia. Installed in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, it became one of the Russian Empire's greatest treasures. For over 2 centuries, it awed dignitaries and dazzled visitors, until the dark clouds of World War II rolled in. In 1941, Nazi forces invaded the Soviet Union. As they swept through, they looted countless works of art. The Amber Room was high on their list. Soviet curators, knowing they had little time, tried to conceal it behind wallpaper, but the Nazis quickly discovered the treasure. Within days, the panels were dismantled, packed into crates, and shipped to Königsberg, Germany. There, in the city's castle, it was reassembled and put on display for the duration of the war. And then, it vanished. In 1945, as the Allies closed in and the city of Königsberg burned under heavy bombing, the Amber Room disappeared without a trace. Some believe it was destroyed in the fire. Others are certain it was crated up again and sent away, hidden in a mine, a bunker, or even aboard a ship that now rests at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Over the decades, countless treasure hunters have searched for it, chasing rumors from abandoned salt mines in Poland to underground tunnels in East Germany. Some have claimed to find fragments, small amber pieces or gilded fittings, but the room itself has never reappeared. The mystery has even claimed lives. In the 1990s, 2 German treasure hunters died in an explosion while searching for the Amber Room in a collapsed mine. Another man, who claimed to have information about its location, died under suspicious circumstances. Today, a painstaking replica of the Amber Room stands in the Catherine Palace, completed in 2003. It is beautiful, but for many, it's a shadow of the original. Somewhere, perhaps deep underground or hidden behind the walls of a forgotten building, the real Amber Room may still wait, glowing silently in the dark, the golden ghost of an empire long gone. Number 10. Lord Lucan, the peer who vanished. On the night of November 7th, 1974, the life of Richard John Bingham, better known as the 7th Earl of Lucan, took a turn that would seal his place in criminal folklore. Lucan was no ordinary man. He was an aristocrat with a taste for luxury, a skilled backgammon player, and a fixture in London's high society. But by that autumn evening, he was drowning in debt, locked in a bitter custody battle with his estranged wife, Veronica, and teetering on the edge of ruin. That night, a violent scene unfolded in the basement of the Lucans' Belgravia home. Sandra Rivet, the family's 29-year-old nanny, was bludgeoned to death with a piece of lead pipe. Lady Lucan herself was attacked, but managed to escape, running bleeding into a nearby pub where she gasped out her story. Her husband had attacked her and murdered the nanny by mistake, thinking she was his wife. Police raced to find Lord Lucan, but he was already on the move. He borrowed a friend's car, drove to Sussex, and spoke briefly with another acquaintance, his last confirmed sighting. After that, he vanished. Theories about his fate spiraled immediately. Some believed he had committed suicide, throwing himself into the English Channel, his body lost to the tides. Others were convinced his wealthy friends had spirited him away, helping him start a new life abroad to avoid trial and disgrace. Over the years, supposed Lucan sightings popped up everywhere from Australia to Africa to South America. One even claimed he was living quietly as a goat herder in Namibia. The British press feasted on the story. Lucan's aristocratic image, tailored suits, club memberships, the perfect smile, clashed almost theatrically with the idea of him as a murderer on the run. Theories flourished. Was he framed? Was the attack a botched burglary? Or was it a calculated plan gone wrong? Lady Lucan never wavered in her account that he had been the attacker. Decades later, the mystery remains tantalizingly unresolved. In 1999, Lucan was officially declared dead, though without a body. In 2016, a death certificate was finally issued. But for those who believe he escaped justice, these legal formalities mean little. They point to inconsistencies in the investigation, the tight-lipped loyalty of his social circle, and the ease with which a man of his means could have disappeared in the pre-digital age. Today, the Lucan case sits somewhere between crime story and legend, a reminder that in certain rare circumstances, the powerful can simply vanish. And somewhere, perhaps in a quiet coastal village or a sun-baked corner of the world, an old man with the air of an English gentleman might still be watching the headlines, wondering if his name will ever fade from history's memory. Number 11. JFK assassination, the shots that still echo. On November 22nd, 1963, at 12:30 p.m., Dallas, Texas, became the stage for one of the most shocking events in modern history. President John F. Kennedy's motorcade was gliding through Dealey Plaza when 3 shots rang out. By 1 p.m., the 46-year-old leader of the free world was pronounced dead. The official story is simple. Lee Harvey Oswald, firing from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, acted alone. But from the moment the shots were fired, doubts have thrived, and the JFK assassination has grown into perhaps the most dissected mystery of the 20th century. The Warren Commission, established by President Lyndon B. Johnson, concluded in 1964 that Oswald was the sole assassin. Yet their findings immediately met skepticism. Critics pointed to inconsistencies. The magic bullet theory, that one projectile caused multiple wounds in both Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally, the number of shots heard by witnesses, and the possibility of another gunman on the grassy knoll. Then came the Zapruder film, a grainy home movie capturing the fatal shot to Kennedy's head. To some, it clearly suggested more than one shooter. To others, it was inconclusive. The footage, slowed down and replayed for decades, has become as much a cultural artifact as the assassination itself, haunting in its stark depiction of a national tragedy. Theories multiplied. The mafia, angered by Kennedy's crackdown on organized crime, Cuban exiles, furious over the Bay of Pigs, the CIA, silencing a president who threatened to dismantle its power, even the Soviet Union in the throes of the Cold War. Each theory has its believers, its evidence, and its counter-evidence. Oswald himself added fuel to the fire. Arrested within hours, he declared, "I'm just a patsy." 2 days later, he was shot dead on live television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. an act that deepened suspicion. Why kill Oswald before he could stand trial? Was Ruby silencing him, or was it an impulsive act of revenge, as he claimed? In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded there was probably a second gunman, citing acoustic evidence, though that evidence was later questioned. Files related to the assassination have been periodically released over the years, but many remain classified, fueling speculation that the full truth has never been told. For Americans, the assassination was more than just the loss of a president. It was the shattering of an era's optimism, a wound that never fully healed. Standing in Dealey Plaza today, the air feels heavy with memory. The grassy knoll is still there. The sixth-floor window still overlooks the street. And somewhere, in the countless books, documentaries, and whispered conversations, the question lingers. Did one man truly change history that day? Or was the president's death the result of a conspiracy buried deeper than we will ever uncover? Number 12. The Princes in the Tower. A crown won in silence. The year was 1483, and England was a kingdom teetering between peace and chaos. King Edward IV had died unexpectedly, leaving his 12-year-old son, Edward V, as heir. Alongside him stood his younger brother, Richard, Duke of York. Two boys, the living embodiment of the Yorkist line in the Wars of the Roses. For a brief moment, their path to the throne seemed certain. But their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, had other plans. Acting as Lord Protector, Richard took charge of his nephews, ostensibly to prepare Edward V's coronation. The boys were lodged in the Tower of London, then not just a prison, but a royal residence, awaiting the ceremony. And then the coronation was postponed. Whispers began. Richard declared the boys illegitimate, citing a pre-contract of marriage that supposedly invalidated Edward IV's union with their mother, Elizabeth Woodville. Parliament agreed, and Richard was crowned Richard III that summer. The princes were seen playing in the Tower gardens a few times after, their windows occasionally lit by candlelight. And then, silence. By the autumn of 1483, they had vanished. No official announcement, no public funeral, nothing. It was as if the young king and his brother had been erased. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed Richard III had ordered their murder to secure his throne. Others suspected Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, or even agents of Henry Tudor, the future Henry VII, seeking to clear his own path. Decades later, Sir Thomas More wrote that the boys had been smothered in their sleep and buried under a staircase. In 1674, during renovations to the tower, workmen discovered two small skeletons beneath the White Tower's stairs. They were reburied in Westminster Abbey, but without modern testing, their identities remain uncertain. Defenders of Richard III insist he had no need to kill the princes, arguing there is no hard evidence against him. Some even suggest the boys were smuggled out of the tower and lived in secret, pointing to later pretenders like Perkin Warbeck, who claimed to be Richard, Duke of York. But without proof, these theories remain tantalizing shadows. The Tower of London today is a place of tourists and beefeaters, but its stones remember. Guides still tell the story of the prince's disappearance, and on quiet evenings, some say you can glimpse two small figures in white walking along the battlements before fading into the mist. History is written by the victors, and the fate of Edward V and his brother may have been buried along with them. Whether they were murdered in the dark or spirited away to safety, their absence changed the course of English history, a crown won in silence over the bodies of two boys who should have been kings. Number 13. The Zodiac Killer. The Cipher of Death. In the late 1960s, Northern California was gripped by fear. A man, or perhaps more than one, was hunting people in the night, striking without warning, and then sending letters to newspapers, not just admitting the crimes, but daring the public to catch him. He signed them with a strange crosshair-like symbol and called himself the Zodiac. The confirmed Zodiac murders began in December 1968, when two teenagers, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, were shot dead on a lonely road in Vallejo. 7 months later, another couple, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau, were ambushed in their car. Mageau survived to give police a description, a stocky man, possibly in his 30s with light hair. A month later, the killer struck again, stabbing a young couple picnicking at Lake Berryessa, this time wearing an executioner-style hood with his strange crosshair emblem on the chest. His final confirmed victim, cab driver Paul Stein, was shot in San Francisco in October 1969, a crime witnessed by multiple people, yet the killer slipped away. But it wasn't just the murders that terrified the public. It was the letters. The Zodiac sent a series of notes to newspapers, each filled with bombastic threats, strange ramblings, and cryptograms he claimed would reveal his identity. The first cipher, a 408-character puzzle, was cracked by a school teacher and his wife within a week, revealing a chilling manifesto about killing for pleasure. Other ciphers, including the infamous 340, resisted solution for decades, until a team of amateur codebreakers finally cracked it in 2020, only to find it contained more taunts, no name. The killer seemed to relish the attention, promising to attack school buses and claiming a body count far higher than the confirmed murders. Police forces across multiple counties chased leads, interviewing suspects ranging from ex-military men to reclusive loners. One man, Arthur Lee Allen, became the prime suspect, but DNA tests later failed to link him definitively to the crimes. The Zodiac case is infamous for its contradictions. He was methodical, yet unpredictable, careful enough to evade capture, but reckless enough to kill in public places. His writing swung between deliberate misspellings and moments of sophistication, making it unclear whether he was brilliant, unstable, or both. Even now, more than 50 years later, amateur sleuths pore over the evidence, convinced they can unmask him. Theories abound, some grounded in forensics, others spiraling into conspiracy. The FBI officially considers the case open, though leads have grown cold. The mystery endures because the Zodiac wasn't just a killer, he was a performance. He made his crimes a puzzle, a public spectacle, as if daring the world to solve him. And perhaps that was his greatest cruelty, not just the lives he took, but the fact that his name, his face, and his truth remain hidden, taunting us from the shadows, just as he intended. Number 14. JonBenét Ramsey, the pageant queen in the shadows. The morning of December 26, 1996, began like any other in Boulder, Colorado, until Patsy Ramsey dialed 911 in a voice shaking with panic. Her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was missing. A ransom note had been found on the kitchen staircase, demanding $118,000 for her safe return, an oddly specific figure, almost exactly matching her father's recent bonus. JonBenét wasn't just any little girl. She was a child beauty pageant star, with bright eyes, perfect curls, and a confidence that seemed years beyond her age. Her photographs, smiling in sequined dresses, crowned with tiaras, would soon be splashed across every TV screen in America. That morning, the police arrived to find the Ramsey home in a state of confusion. Friends and family came and went, contaminating potential evidence. Hours later, in a grim twist, John Ramsey himself discovered JonBenét's body in the basement. She had been struck on the head and strangled with a garrote fashioned from a paintbrush handle. The ransom note was now clearly irrelevant. The little girl was already dead. From the start, the case was a storm of contradictions. There were no signs of forced entry. The ransom note was unusually long, its tone theatrical, echoing lines from movies like Dirty Harry. Handwriting analysis was inconclusive. Forensic evidence pointed in multiple directions, and some of it, crucially, was mishandled or lost. Suspicion fell quickly on the Ramseys themselves. Some detectives believed the murder was the result of a family conflict, hastily staged to look like a kidnapping. Others argued it was the work of an intruder, perhaps a stalker or a burglar who panicked. Theories split the public into camps, and the intense media coverage turned the grieving family into both suspects and tabloid fixtures. Years later, DNA testing on evidence from JonBenét's clothing suggested an unknown male's profile, seemingly clearing her immediate family. But not everyone was convinced. Critics argued the sample could have been contamination from manufacturing. Meanwhile, confessions trickled in from unstable individuals around the world, each one proving false. The case has endured because it refuses to settle into a single narrative. Was it a botched kidnapping? A crime of passion? A cover-up? Every piece of evidence seems to have an alternate interpretation. And through it all, JonBenét's image, frozen in pageant perfection, remains as haunting as it is heartbreaking. Nearly 3 decades later, the Ramsey house still stands, its basement forever linked to a crime that has no ending. For some, the truth lies buried in overlooked details. For others, it's lost forever in the chaos of those first crucial hours. But one fact is certain: the murder of JonBenét Ramsey isn't just an unsolved case. It's a mirror reflecting our fascination with innocence, beauty, and the darkness that can hide behind both. Number 15. Tamam Shud Case. The Man on the Beach. On the morning of December 1st, 1948, the body of a well-dressed man was found slumped against a seawall on Somerton Beach, just outside Adelaide, Australia. He wore a neat suit and polished shoes, yet carried no wallet, no ID, and no hat, unusual for the era. All the labels in his clothing had been meticulously removed. There were no signs of violence. A half-smoked cigarette rested on his collar. In his pockets, bus tickets, an unused train ticket, chewing gum, comb, matches. Nothing to say who he was. An autopsy suggested possible poisoning, but no trace of any known toxin could be found. The man was a ghost with no past. Then came the twist. Months later, investigators discovered a hidden pocket sewn into the man's trousers. Inside was a tiny, tightly rolled scrap of paper with 2 words printed in Persian script: Tamam Shud. Translated, it means ended or finished. The phrase comes from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book of 12th century poetry. This led police to search for copies of the book, and in a bizarre stroke of luck, they found one in a car parked near the beach. Inside the back cover was a torn section, exactly where the words Tamam Shud would have been, matching the scrap in the man's pocket. Even stranger, the book contained a series of penciled letters and numbers believed to be a code. Despite decades of cryptographic efforts, the cipher remains unbroken. The book also contained a local phone number belonging to a young nurse named Jessica Thompson, often called Jestin in reports. When police interviewed her, she seemed nervous, even frightened. She denied knowing the man, but some officers later claimed she nearly fainted when shown his death mask. Her link to the case has fueled endless speculation. Was she a former lover, a spy contact, or simply an innocent caught in a web of coincidence? Theories range from the plausible to the fantastic. Some believe the Somerton Man was a Cold War spy, killed for knowing too much. Others think it was a suicide tied to a failed romance, the Rubaiyat serving as a poetic farewell. There's even speculation about rare poisons that vanish from the body within hours, perfect for assassination. In recent years, advances in genetic genealogy have allowed researchers to extract DNA from hair found in the man's plaster death mask. A 2022 announcement claimed the man was likely Carl Charles Webb, a 43-year-old electrical engineer from Melbourne. Yet many questions remain unanswered, especially why a seemingly ordinary man ended his life, or had it ended for him, in such a cryptic way. The Somerton Man still sits at the crossroads of romance, espionage, and enigma. And somewhere in those penciled letters, the truth may still be hiding, waiting for the right mind to finish the puzzle. Number 16. Tupac Shakur's murder. The last ride in Vegas. On the night of September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas glittered with the neon buzz of a Saturday evening. Inside the MGM Grand, Tupac Shakur, already one of the most influential voices in hip-hop, had just watched a Mike Tyson fight with Death Row Records boss Suge Knight. Hours later, the 25-year-old rapper would be lying mortally wounded on the pavement, the victim of a drive-by shooting that remains one of music's most enduring mysteries. After the fight, Tupac and his entourage got into an altercation in the hotel lobby with Orlando Anderson, a reputed member of the Southside Crips. Surveillance cameras caught the scuffle, and tension hung heavy in the air as the group left. At around 11:15 p.m., Tupac and Knight were stopped at a red light in their black BMW on Flamingo Road when a white Cadillac pulled up alongside them. A burst of gunfire rang out, 14 shots in total, 4 of which struck Tupac. Knight was grazed but managed to speed away. Tupac was rushed to University Medical Center, where he fought for his life for 6 days before dying on September 13th. His death hit the music world like an earthquake, cutting short a career that had already reshaped hip-hop with its raw honesty, social commentary, and poetic fire. The investigation began with a tangle of leads and motives. Was it gang retaliation for the casino fight earlier that night? A hit ordered in the escalating East Coast-West Coast rap feud, which had already claimed lives and stoked dangerous rivalries? Or something darker, an inside job involving record label politics, betrayal, and money? Orlando Anderson was questioned but denied involvement, and no charges were filed. He himself was killed in an unrelated shooting 2 years later. Over the decades, rumors have accused everyone from rival rapper the notorious B.I.G. to shadowy figures within Death Row Records. Theories even emerged claiming Tupac faked his death, pointing to supposed sightings in Cuba or Jamaica and cryptic clues in his music. For years, the case stagnated until 2023, when Las Vegas police made a startling move. Dwayne "Keffy D" Davis, a former gang member who had openly spoken in interviews about being in the Cadillac that night, was arrested and charged with Tupac's murder. He claimed he didn't pull the trigger himself, but prosecutors allege he orchestrated the shooting as revenge for the earlier fight. Whether his trial will finally bring closure remains to be seen. Tupac's murder is more than a true crime story. It's a cultural wound. His lyrics, often prophetic, spoke of dying young, of leaving behind a legacy instead of just a life. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. The music lives on, but somewhere in the Vegas night, under the flash of neon and the hum of passing cars, the echoes of those shots still linger. Number 17. The Great Train Robbery. The heist that stopped a train. In the early hours of August 8th, 1963, a Royal Mail train was thundering through the quiet English countryside, carrying sacks of cash from Glasgow to London. It was a routine journey, except this one would never reach its destination. A gang of thieves, meticulously organized and brimming with audacity, were waiting to pull off what would become one of Britain's most famous crimes: the Great Train Robbery. At around 3 a.m., near Ledburn in Buckinghamshire, the robbers executed their plan. They tampered with a railway signal, switching it from green to red. When the train stopped, the driver stepped out to investigate and was immediately overpowered. The gang, 15 strong, boarded the train and detached the engine and first 2 carriages, hauling them about half a mile down the track to a waiting spot. Inside those carriages were over 120 sacks of cash, mostly used banknotes, totaling £2.6 million. In today's money, that's more than £50 million. The robbers worked quickly but carefully, loading the bags into waiting vehicles. Despite the massive haul, not a single shot was fired, and no one was killed, though the train driver, Jack Mills, was struck on the head and injured during the heist. The gang had planned their getaway just as thoroughly. They drove the loot to a remote farmhouse called Leatherslade, intending to lay low for weeks, but their greatest strength, their numbers, became their weakness. The farmhouse was soon discovered, along with fingerprints, food supplies, and playing cards. Over the next few months, police rounded up most of the gang, including mastermind Bruce Reynolds, safecracker Tommy Wisby, and the now infamous Ronnie Biggs. Biggs became the robbery's most notorious figure, not because of his role, it was relatively minor, but because of his escape. In 1965, he scaled the wall of Wandsworth Prison and fled to France, then Brazil, where he lived openly for decades, thumbing his nose at British authorities. He became a folk anti-hero to some, a criminal celebrity to others. Yet despite the arrests, not all the robbers were caught, and not all the money was recovered. Several members of the gang vanished, their identities never confirmed. Some say a portion of the loot remains hidden in the countryside, buried and forgotten. Others believe it was laundered and quietly spent, the fortune dissolving into everyday life. The Great Train Robbery remains a story of contradictions, a crime both bloodless and brutal, meticulously planned, yet ultimately undone by sloppy mistakes. And somewhere in the quiet fields of Buckinghamshire, if you stand still long enough, you might almost hear the distant rumble of a train slowing for a signal, and the ghosts of men who thought they could stop time with a red light. Number 18. Dyatlov Pass Incident. Death in the Ural Mountains. In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out into the icy reaches of the northern Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. Led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, the group aimed to reach Otorten, a peak whose name in the local Mansi language ominously means, "Don't go there." They never returned. When rescuers finally located their camp weeks later, they were met with a scene that defied explanation. The group's tent, pitched on a snowy slope, had been slashed open from the inside. The hikers' belongings, including boots and coats, were left behind, as if they had fled in panic. The bodies were found scattered in the snow, some nearly a mile from the tent. 2 were in their underwear, huddled near the remains of a small fire. Others were partially clothed, wearing mismatched garments taken from their dead companions. The conditions suggested they had left the tent in a hurry, without time to dress, despite temperatures plunging to -30 degrees Celsius, -22 degrees Fahrenheit. The causes of death only deepened the mystery. Some had died of hypothermia, but others bore horrific injuries. One woman's tongue was missing, another's ribs crushed, another's skull fractured. Wounds experts said could not have been caused by another human without leaving external marks. Radiation traces were found on some clothing. And perhaps strangest of all, the search team reported an orange glow in the sky on the night of the incident. The Soviet investigation was swift and inconclusive, attributing the tragedy to a compelling natural force, a phrase that explained nothing. Files were classified, and the area was closed to the public for years. Over the decades, theories have multiplied. An avalanche is the most widely accepted explanation today, with recent simulations suggesting a rare slab avalanche could have struck while the hikers slept, forcing them to flee. But this doesn't satisfy everyone, especially those who point out the slope's low angle and lack of avalanche evidence. Other theories range from the plausible to the bizarre: infrasound waves causing panic, secret military weapons testing, an encounter with the Mansi people gone wrong, or even an attack by something not entirely human. The radiation, some say, hints at military experiments or a crash of a nuclear-powered device. The orange lights? Perhaps a missile test, or something stranger still. In 2019, Russian prosecutors reopened the case, ultimately reaffirming a natural cause theory. Yet many remain unconvinced. The Dyatlov Pass incident endures because it refuses to give a neat answer. The image of 9 hikers, full of life and laughter in their last photographs, contrasted with the frozen chaos of their final night. On that barren slope, the wind still howls over the snow, erasing footprints within hours. Whatever happened there more than 60 years ago is now part of the mountain itself, silent, cold, and keeping its secret. Number 19. Levi Davis disappearance, vanishing in Barcelona. On the evening of October 29, 2022, Levi Davis, a 24-year-old former professional rugby player and reality TV personality, arrived in Barcelona, Spain. He'd taken a ferry from Ibiza, where he'd been staying with a friend, telling her he needed to get away for a bit. He traveled light, just a small backpack and his phone. Within hours, he would vanish into the city's night, leaving behind one of the most perplexing missing person cases in recent British memory. Surveillance cameras last caught Levi at 10:05 p.m., leaving the old Irish pub on La Rambla, Barcelona's famous boulevard. He walked alone, without apparent distress, and that is the last confirmed sighting of him. His passport was later found in the city, but his phone had stopped pinging cell towers shortly after he left the bar. Levi wasn't just a public figure for his rugby career. He had also appeared on Celebrity X Factor and Celebs Go Dating, known for his charisma, openness, and ambition. But in the months before his disappearance, friends said he had been struggling with his mental health and facing personal pressures, including financial difficulties. Theories about what happened to him have been as varied as they are unsettling. Some point to voluntary disappearance, that he may have chosen to start anew somewhere else. Others believe he may have been the victim of foul play, possibly linked to crime in the area. Barcelona, beautiful and bustling as it is also known for pickpocketing and occasional organized crime activity. In December 2022, private investigators hired by his family revealed they were pursuing leads suggesting Levi may have drowned in the city's port. But no body was found, and Spanish police have not confirmed this theory. Another possibility, raised but never substantiated, is that he became entangled in dangerous dealings abroad, given his travel history. What makes the case so haunting is its sheer absence of hard evidence. In an age where digital trails are nearly impossible to erase, Levi seemed to drop completely off the grid in the space of a single walk down a city street. No confirmed sightings, no bank activity, no trace. His mother, Julie, has continued to push for answers, traveling to Spain and appealing for witnesses, convinced that someone, somewhere, knows more. But as of now, Levi's disappearance remains a question without an ending. Barcelona's La Rambla is always alive. Musicians, tourists, locals weaving through the neon and noise. Yet somewhere beyond the streetlights, a young man stepped into the dark, and the world hasn't seen him since. Number 20. Mary Flanagan. The girl who never came home. It was a chilly January morning in 1959 when 16-year-old Mary Flanagan kissed her family goodbye and walked out of her home in Newham, East London. She told them she was going to work, but she never arrived. That was the last time anyone in her family ever saw her. Mary was a bright, pretty girl with dark hair and a lively spirit. She worked at a factory in Stratford, and her routine was reliable. But in the days before her disappearance, her life had taken a turn her family only learned about afterward. Mary had recently begun seeing an older man named Tom, reportedly in his 30s. Friends claimed she had confided that Tom was married and that she might be pregnant. When Mary didn't come home that night, her family contacted police. At first, authorities treated her case as a typical teenage runaway, assuming she'd return on her own. But days turned to weeks, and there was still no sign of her. Investigators questioned Tom, who denied knowing where she had gone. He eventually vanished from the area himself, fueling suspicions that he knew more than he admitted. The deeper the search went, the stranger it became. There were unconfirmed sightings of Mary in the months following her disappearance. In London, in the English countryside, even as far away as the north of England. Some claimed she had gone to Ireland to live with relatives or start a new life. Others believed she met with foul play on the very day she vanished. Over the years, the case grew cold, but it was never closed. Detectives revisited it several times, each time hoping that advances in investigative techniques or a new tip would shed light on what happened. Appeals were broadcast on anniversaries of her disappearance. Her family, clinging to hope, kept her story alive. Though as decades passed, hope was often shadowed by the need for closure. In the mid-2000s, police made a renewed push, appealing directly to Tom, if he was still alive, to come forward. They released digitally aged images of what Mary might look like in her 60s. But no breakthrough came. Mary Flanagan's disappearance is now considered the UK's longest-running missing person case. She would be in her 80s today. For her surviving relatives, the mystery is not just about finding answers. It's about reclaiming the ending to a story that stopped too soon. Every January, when the date of her disappearance comes around, it's a reminder that some absences echo for a lifetime. Mary walked out her front door into the fog of London, and somewhere the truth about where she went and why is still waiting. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. I hope you enjoyed this story, and thanks for watching.